So in this video, we are solving quadratic equations by factoring. So what we learned in Unit 8 is that when you have three pieces, an A, B, C, you can do the X puzzle, turn it into its factors, and then get two parentheses for your answer. So in this unit, the reason why we learned to factor in the last unit is that we can use this method to be able to find out the solutions of a quadratic equation. So in number one, just to give this some context, if you were to graph number one in the calculator, you would end up with a graph that looks like this. So what we need are the solutions of this graph. The solutions are the two places where it touches the x-axis. So this graph has two places where the x touches the x-axis. Okay, so we need to figure out where it touches the x-axis, and before the days of calculators, we have to do it by hand, so that way we know that you know how to solve by hand. In a few days, you can plug them into the calculator, but for today, I want for you to be able to solve by factoring by hand. Okay, so in this example here, so in example one, I have A, B, and C. So the way that we factor is we labeled A, B, and C. So to factor, you draw an X for your X puzzle. You do A times C on the top and B on the bottom. My A number times my C number is the number 4. My B on the bottom is the number 5. I need to figure out what multiplies to make a 4 and what adds to make a 5. So what multiplies to make 4 is the numbers 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. Which of those factors add to make 5? 1 times 4. So now what we do is we rewrite the first number, 2x squared. We split the middle, so plus 1x. If it comes from the x puzzle, you have to have an x with it. So there's a 1x and a 4x from the x puzzle. And then there's a positive 2 in the back. So now to factor by grouping means that I draw a line down the middle and I figure out what I can take out. So a 2 and a 1, I can divide them both by 1, and I can take out an x. I put that on the outside. 2 divided by 1 is 2. 2 x's, remove 1 x, that leaves me with x. 1 divided by 1 is 1. When exponents are stacked, you subtract. 1 minus 1 is 0 x's. I factor the second part. What can come out of a 4 and a 2? The number 2. What's left over? 4 divided by 2 is 2 with an x. 2 divided by 2 is 1. If your parentheses match, that's how you know that you did this correctly. So my final answer for number 1 is that there is a 2x plus 1 from the parentheses and a 1x plus 2 where the numbers hang out of the parentheses. So the only thing that makes this different from what we did in Unit 8 is that now this is set equal to 0. So what equals 0 means is I need to take each factor. 2x plus 1 equals 0, and 1x plus 2 equals 0. I take both of these, and I set them equal to 0. To solve for x, you learned this back when we did this at the very beginning of the school year. So to solve for x, you need to start by subtracting 1 from both sides. 2x equals negative 1. To get x by itself, you divide by 2 and then divide by 2. So one of my answers for number 1 is that x equals negative 1/2. The other answer, to solve for x, you subtract 2 from both sides. Makes it go away. On the left, I still have a 1x. 0 minus 2 is the number negative 2. To get x by itself, you divide. Negative 2 divided by 1 is the number negative 2. So my other solution is x equals negative 2. So in number 1, if we graphed this, one of the dots hits at the number negative 1/2. That's a solution. A 0, a root, an x-intercept, and the other one would hit at the number negative 2. So the correct answer for number 1 is x equals negative 1/2, and x equals negative 2. Okay, so those are my two solutions for this first equation. So I'm going to do number 2, and then you'll try a couple of them on your own. So what it says in the instructions, it's super important. It says make sure that the trinomial equals 0. We have an x squared, an x, and a constant, and it equals 0. So if we look at number 2 is not ready for factoring because it doesn't equal 0. So on number 2, what we need to do is get it ready by moving this 1, by subtracting it to the left. That leaves me with 3x squared plus 2x. We have to subtract the 1 to move it over, and now it equals 0. Now that it equals 0, we can do our x puzzle because we have an a, a b, and a c. If it doesn't equal 0, this is not going to work. So we need to make sure that it equals 0. To factor, I need an a times c on the top and a b on the bottom. A times c is the number negative 3. B is the number positive 2. What multiplies to make 3? A 1 and a 3. It's negative though, which means I have to have one negative in these factors. Negative 1 and a positive 3 would add to make the number positive 2. So I'm going to leave you off right here. 3x squared minus 1x. Remember, if it has an x puzzle, there has to be an x with it, and then a minus 1. So that's called splitting the middle. Instead of that middle term, I rewrote it as its two factors. So when you're ready, go ahead and finish up number 2. What can come out of these factors? A 1 and an x with some leftovers. What can come out of these factors? The only thing I can divide by is a 1. So in number 2, go ahead and keep factoring. You'll get 2 parentheses as your final answer. Set them equal to 0, and your final answer will be x equals something and x equals something else. Okay, so the correct answer for number 2, you factor it, you set them equal to 0. All right, let's look at the next ones. On number 3, oops, this is get you out of here. All right, number 3 is ready to factor. Ooh, that's fancy. So in number 3, it's set equal to 0. My a is 1, my b is 8, my c is 7. A times c, 1 times 7 is 7. B goes on the bottom, that's an 8. So go ahead and try to factor number 3. On number 4 is not ready. It has to equal a 0, so that number's got to move. So it's actually x squared plus 11x. To move a negative 30 to the other side, you have to add 30 because you need to get rid of it. So I'm going to plus 30 so that now it equals 0. Okay, now I have A, there's an invisible 1, B is 11, C is 30, so number 4 can now be factored. On number 5, it's not ready yet because it doesn't equal 0. Be like, hey, silly, this has to be a 0. So I need to drop that off on the other side. The x term has to be in the middle. The x term is the B number. The B is the one that has the x in it. So I need to put that in the middle. So this is 7x squared. When I move a negative 22 across an equal sign, you have to do the opposite. So you would add 22x. Then there's a plus 3. Now that you move the 22 over, it will now equal 0. Now we have an a, that's the number with the x squared, a b, that's the number with the x, a c, that's the constant by itself, and it equals 0. So now you're ready to draw your x and do a times c over b. The same idea with number 6. Again, it has to equal 0. So this one's got 2 things in the wrong way. So it's x squared. To move a negative 4x to the other side of the equal sign, you'd have to add 4x. Add 4x on the right. We also have to add 4x on the left. Equals means it's balanced. So if it was on the right side, we also have to do it to the left side. This -3 is also on the wrong side. We're going to move that guy over as well. To move a -3, we have to do the opposite, which is add 3. So we add 3, and now there's nothing left on the right, so now it equals 0. So we've got an A, which is a 1, a B, and a C. So when you're ready, try your X puzzle for number 6. Okay, and this last page is the same thing. So on this last page, we are making sure that you have a number with your x squared. Then comes the number with your x. Then comes the number by itself, that's the constant. And it has to always equal 0. So get this in the correct form. Make sure that these guys are in the right form. Okay, so go ahead and factor and set these equal to 0, and then you'll get your answers from here.